Welcome back to the table. Today, Emily and I, and I'm going to be honest, mostly Emily,
But I'm David.
have a review for Turing Machine. This was a Gen Con release that we were able to get a hold of, and both of us like it. One of us
loves it.
So we're going to give you a review. We're going to tell you a little bit about the game, but then we're really going to dig into some things about this game that hopefully will let you know whether it's for you, whether it's for maybe someone smarter than you, someone maybe not as smart as you, but that's really what it's going to boil down to. This is a deduction game.
Yep.
And I'm going to let Emily do most of the talking because just like a co-op game of this with Emily, I just sit here quietly and she solves the puzzle.
Stop. Okay, this game is a puzzle though. So Turing Machine, based off of Alan Turing, the famous mathematician, like father of computer science. In this game, what we're doing is we have little punch cards and we get to try to guess a 3-digit code. And each of those digits is 1 through 5. They've marked them with colors and shapes so you get to see the positioning. And the way you do it is you have clues around the table that are going to tell you something about the code, right? Like maybe that yellow is yellow less than 3, equal to 3, or greater than 3. And then you get to take a 3-digit code, line it up with its verifier.
This is really a cool part. This is a little intimidating, I think, to some people who aren't used to sort of like maybe computers or old-time computers.
But if you've used punch cards, I think you're going to be like, this is super cool.
You line them up, and then depending on what you're testing, you're going to look and you're either going to get a red X or a green check mark. And that effectively will tell you, yes, the thing you tested is true, or no, it's not true. Now, the thing that you have to wrap your head around, in my opinion, and this is one thing I will always do from now until the end of time when I teach this game, is I've played this game a few times now, and the first time new people are playing, they'll look at this and go, okay, I've got this 3-digit code, and then they get a green check or a red X, and then they're still sitting there thinking, wait, what does that mean again?
Right.
And you have to consider that if it's a test like this where you're really counting, checking to see if yellow is greater, less than, or equal to 3, the blue and the purple
don't matter at all.
They could
be any number. And
they could be any number. So if on your turn you literally didn't care about any other tests, which we'll get to in a second because you do want to care about other tests, you could just put random numbers in for blue and purple and just that yellow number and get that answer. And then, of course, there's a handy-dandy sheet behind a little player screen so that you can kind of track some of this. And they have a lot of really nice, it's not just notes you're taking.
Right.
They have a lot of nice
it's set up well.
sections that allow you to kind of track that in the way that you'd expect.
Yeah. And so, yes, you have to keep in mind that you're testing a code, but that's not telling you if that code is correct. What it's telling you is your one hypothesis for this specific clue was true or false.
Is your head hurting yet?
In a round, you can test up to 3 of these clues at once. So you really are like being a little computer scientist here. You're like running multiple tests at one time with your one piece of code and saying, is this true or false? Is this true or false? Is this true or false? For different tests at the same time.
Now, I should say, Emily, your field of expertise is computer science. So this is right up her alley.
Very much so.
Now, I am not, but I love deduction games, so it should be right up my alley. So it's going to be interesting to see how things come down on that front. But one thing I wanted to mention, I just mentioned sort of one extreme where you're just like stupidly, randomly picking 2 numbers and picking one just to test one thing. But like she said, you're testing 3 things. So before you just sloppily put 3 numbers together, you're going to want to look at all of the tests and go, okay, what 3 numbers would be the best 3 numbers to get the most out of the 3 questions that I'm going to ask? Because the first time I played it, I set up some numbers and I got a good answer here, maybe another good, decent answer somewhere else. But then I was like, oh, I should have put this other number here.
Because now the last thing I'm testing isn't going to tell me very much.
Yeah, you definitely want to survey these cards out here and do a little bit of searching for information between the actual tests. And that's really, that connective tissue is really where you're going to more efficiently solve the problem.
And when you're playing competitively, what you're doing as you're taking your numbers, you're taking these 3 tests, sometimes there's not enough numbers for everybody. So you're even waiting for somebody else's numbers so you can test yours. And the good thing about it with the components is they do have a part where you're marking with dry erase numbers which verifier goes with which clue. So you won't end up in a spot where oh no, I put the wrong thing back in the wrong spot, and now every time I've tested it, the information it gave me wasn't right.
That would be bad.
Yeah, so they did account for that. And then in between rounds, so you ask up to 3 questions. When you're done asking your questions, everybody puts in their hand, and they'll do thumbs up, they think they know the answer to the code, or thumbs down, I don't know. If everybody says thumbs down, we'll go on to another round, and we just keep going. If someone said thumbs up, they'll test their code to see if they got it right. If multiple people tried and they both got it right the same round, that's great. The ties are broken by the number of questions you asked. So, although you can ask 3 questions each round, you might sometimes say, like, I'm only going to ask 1 question, or I'm only going to ask 2 questions, because I think I have enough information with just the questions I'm asking.
Yeah, and depending on your skill level, I can tell you Emily's very good at this. You can get to the point where you ask, say, 3 questions in the first round, and then you're kind of like, oh, hold on, I can think about this because I think I can just do it in 1 question.
Yep. So talking about the strategy a little bit, it does say in the booklet there's some tips in for strategy, but one of the big ones is that all of the clues you have are necessary to get to the 1 possible code. So it's not like there's multiple codes and you can all get multiple codes. There's 1 possible code, and if you knew all of the information on the cards, you would know what that one thing is. And each of those cards are needed to get to there. So like David was pointing to earlier, there is a lot of like in-between information you're getting, or in between parts of the game. So you might look and say like, oh, we have information about blue and we have information about yellow, but we only have 1 piece of information about purple. So maybe purple's the one we're going to have to deduce later, and we're going to have to kind of try to get there once we already know blue and yellow. It's that level of strategy, though, that is going into this game. So if you like a deduction game and you are like, I really want a challenge, I really want something that's going to put me to the test, I think that Turing Machine does a great job of that. It also has multiple modes. So the way we have it set up right now is a standard with 5 questions, but it not only has 3 different levels of difficulty. So it's got an easy, a standard, and a hard. So you can do the same thing, but with harder clues. It also, in the back of the book, it says there are 2 different modes that you can do using their app, which is the extreme mode and the nightmare.
Oh my gosh.
So if you were like, oh, that was a lot of fun, I wonder if they have anything harder. They do. They do have something harder.
Many of you aren't going to be asking yourselves that question. I do say there is one thing to point out that the game offers that you should be aware of, and that is an app that lets you have millions. There's no exact number, but it says that there are millions of things. I can tell you that's plenty.
Yes.
Like
You're not going to run out.
You could probably do 100 and not remember the first one you did very well. So yeah, that is effectively everything that's going on in the game. But the game does come with all these cards, so you're going to have a bunch of options for all of these things. You're not putting these things together willy-nilly, though.
No.
There are very specific setups. So whether you're using the app or the few that they have in the rule book, you are going through and finding card number X, and then these cards have numbers as well, and then pairing those up very specifically. And like Emily said, using a dry erase to make sure that you don't like mess them up while you're playing. So on to the review a little bit. I will start. Emily will have a lot more to say about this, but she alluded to it a second ago. If you are a fan of deduction games, and I'll take that a step further and say, if you think you're good at deduction games, then this game is definitely going to be something you want to try out to test your mettle.
Yes.
Because I thought I was good at deduction games. Emily is sort of next level deduction. She's humble about it, but she's like, she's up there.
I love logic puzzles. They're just my jam. Like if you guys saw the top 10s, I have a lot of deduction games in my top 10, and it's because I just really love deduction games.
But one of the things that we both agree on regarding deduction games, and this is the good and the bad of them, I've always said deduction games can make you feel really smart. You know, you can be that person where, you know, you're playing a game like Cryptid and you're like, oh, here it is, it's right here, and this was your clue, this was your clue, this was your clue. You know all the information. And even if you're just a little bit ahead of everybody else, it feels really good. Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side of that, there may be someone at the table who are like, how did you know all of that? I wasn't that close to that at all. But in Cryptid, they generally may have learned a little something. Mm-hmm. You know, you figured something out. This game, I feel, dials it up a little bit, and what it effectively does is makes those people who are bound to be the smart ones at the table feel even that much more smart, and maybe make the people who could feel dumb at the table, and which happens in all these games, maybe feel even more so.
Yeah, I would say the divide is definitely bigger in this one. To go on that point, though, I think so. You can also play it solo, which is something that not all deduction games allow you to do, right? Like Cryptid, I'm not going to be playing solo, but this
Right.
I definitely am. And that sense of accomplishment you get when you finish the puzzle or when you beat the machine. They have a machine you're playing against on their AI. It's huge, right?
Yeah.
You're like, it's what you want from a deduction game. Oh my god, I finally solved it, and I did it so fast, and this is how I did it. But to David's point, that divide is pretty big with when you're playing with new players or when you're at a new table and you don't know kind of the skill level or the experience level with deduction games. Someone can end up definitely coming away frustrated from this experience.
Yeah, but what's cool about that too, though, is with the co-op mode of this game, you could do that with those people. So if you sit down and you kind of know you're the Emily at the table, if you will, you can play co-op sort of to bring everyone along and sort of like give people used to the things that you're doing in the game and the way you're going through it, so that then maybe you could switch over to the competitive mode and then destroy them. But no, you could switch over to the competitive mode and they'll have a better understanding of what they're trying to do. Because if you start that with people who aren't maybe so into deduction games, or maybe they've played some, but they're just not at your level.
Well, and I would even say that this game, some of the wording can be a little bit tricky. So
Yeah.
sometimes even people who are experienced with deduction and who will like this game, the first playthrough, they're going to be like, what does that mean? So I think honestly, I would always start with a co-op version of this with people around the table, just so that everybody's on the same page. And we can say like, oh, I understand how this logic works. I understand what this means. They do have an addendum in the rule book to some of the harder rules, but one of my negatives for this game, I would say, is that when you get into the hard mode and you get into the harder clues, some of them are not as obvious what they really mean. And even when you get into the addendums, I think they could have been clearer with like more examples or just more specifically, like when you say it could be a multiple of 3, 4, or 5, is it only a multiple of 3 and not 4 or 5?
Oh,
or is
yeah,
it
that's a good
two of
point.
the option?
We ran that into the first game that we played after Gen Con. It was a group of us, and we ran into that a couple times. And I think, like you said, with a few games under your belt, someone's going to understand that. And if at least one person understands those things clearly, and you play co-op a few times, then everyone at the table will understand those clearly. But I would agree, some of those things, not to mention your head's already sort of a little bit
Spinning.
on tilt trying to figure things out. Add to that the fact that, like you said, does that mean exclusively or maybe one of the two or something like that?
Yes. So a negative would definitely be if you can play a full game of this and not realize you read something wrong and be like, oh, well, that was completely different than what I thought. But the flip side positive, I would say, is that unlike some other deduction games, when you're playing it competitively, you can't really screw it up for somebody else.
Exactly. That's probably one of the biggest positives with this is this, you can't screw it up. One of the things that, and I don't mind this about Cryptid and other deduction games, but almost every other deduction game I can think of relies on another player at their table reporting to you some information that they have. And as with human error, oftentimes you'll get a piece of information that's not right, and then you'll play for another 20, 30 minutes.
And be like, this is impossible.
And
There's
like,
literally nothing that's possible.
Right.
What is wrong?
And you're like, are you sure about this? To player X, and they'll go, oh, no, I'm sorry. And like with a lot of those games, like Cryptid, it doesn't bother me too much because Cryptid is still a relatively short game.
Yeah.
But like you said, with this game, you don't have to worry about that. You're really just battling yourself. Own skills of deduction and the machine itself, which is interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, too, that, again, it has harder modes, so there's more things you can do with it. But there's already a lot of puzzle that it starts with. Even at like the easy 4-card, you're still getting kind of a brain-burning experience even your first time you're playing through it.
For sure. Yeah, anything Emily says about this game, just understand that it's probably going to be a little more challenging for the common player than what she characterizes.
But what I would say is that it does have a lot of different modes you can play it, right? We talked about you can play it co-op, you can play it solo, you can play it competitively, and it has a bunch of different modes for difficulty. So I think that if you like this game, it's because you like at least one of those modes, right?
Yeah.
And there's going to be one that you favor more than others. So like if you're a solo player and you love solo games, you could have a hard time getting it to the table, this could be a great game for you.
Oh, for sure. If you're a solo player and you love deduction, do it.
Yeah.
Like, and it's going to test you, but do it. Like, this is definitely the kind of game that you want to get into, because this very easily could be, I think the way Emily, she shared with me how much she enjoys it, and the way it sounds like you enjoy it sounds like the same way someone enjoys a daily puzzle that you would play on an app or in a newspaper.
And they have a daily puzzle on their app,
Oh,
too.
They do?
Yeah.
Well, very clever on them. So, big question, Emily. And we're going to give you a couple scores because I think it's important from a couple different perspectives. I think you're getting a sense of where those scores might end up. But I'll let you take it away. What score would you give it?
So my score, I have to give it a 10. And I know that's really high and I know that's huge, but I love this game. I have played it already more than 10 times, which is a lot to say, like, because it's brand new and some games never even get to 10 plays, but I really enjoy it. My favorite mode to play is co-op, so I really do like it. Like, my partner and I will sit down and we will do extreme mode, 5 or 6 card difficulty, and just sit there for half an hour talking about, like, all the different possible combinations and what's the smartest thing to try next and where do we go, and the feeling that it comes all together when you get the code and you're like, we did it and we beat the machine. This is like unparalleled for me.
I can attest to her feelings on this game. She absolutely loves it. I would also say too, and I think you'd agree with this, that comes with a warning.
Yes.
It's not for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like this game, like I said, I've played other deduction games, not even this one, with players. And some people who just don't sort of grok what's happening, you either feel smart or you feel not so smart when you're playing a game like this, especially competitively. What I will add to this is I just played it cooperatively with Emily. And even then, you still don't feel like the smartest person at the table. Because, I'm not kidding, she was like, well, I can't even reiterate what she was explaining, but she was like, well, we could do this with this, but because of this, and I was just kind of sitting there going, okay. Like, and no offense to Emily, but I was like a little bit in awe of the sort of gaming of the game that you're doing for a game like this. And it's not like, I say gaming the game it's not in a negative way. That is what you have to do in this game.
No, yeah, and I think that the strategy they put in the booklet too, like, assumes that, right? You have to do that to some level.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do it to an extreme level in order to have fun. I will say that I do usually do it to an extreme level because for me that is fun. So that is definitely an Emily 10. An Emily 10.
It's an Emily 10. That's a new thing for the channel. Emily 10. This is a David 7.
Okay,
I really, really, really like this game. For me, this game doesn't take the spot away from Cryptid for me when it comes to deduction. And that's mainly not with what the game is doing for me personally, but for what the game does at the table. I think Cryptid, despite the fact that people can screw things up and it effectively could ruin a game or that you'd have to just reset and start playing again, that is a much more accessible deduction game, I think. It is something where the variables that you're considering are just a little easier to understand. If you've ever played Cryptid sort of on the advanced level, that is what starts to getting to the brain burneriness of what's happening here in a slightly different way. But the advanced level of Cryptid is a little bit more like this experience. So I would say if you've played that advanced level of Cryptid and you're like, yeah, I really love that, and I love just killing those.
You'll love this then.
You will really like this game. It's, again, a slightly different way. But for me, it's definitely a David 7. Or just a 7. Definitely an Emily 10. If you have any more questions about this, though, I won't be answering any of them in the
I'll
comments.
be answering them.
Emily will, because I probably won't be able to answer them as well as she can. But do let us know in the comments below if you have any questions, or if you have any comments, if you've played Turing Machine yourself.
Yeah,
If you
tell us
wanna-
what your review is of it.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear what people think about this compared to other deduction games. But as always, until next time, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you then.